A stormy night with dark, swirling clouds above a lone, eerie farmhouse. Lightning illuminates the scene, casting fleeting shadows on the house and surrounding trees. In the foreground, a vintage radio sits on a wooden table, its dial glowing faintly, while eerie static and faint whispers can be seen emanating from the speaker. A shadowy figure lurks in the doorway of the farmhouse, only partially visible in the dim light. The atmosphere is thick with tension as the storm rages, and the air is heavy with mystery, inviting viewers to discover the chilling secrets within. The storm raged through the night, rattling the windows of the old farmhouse like 100 invisible hands pressing against the glass. Inside, a small radio crackled, the only light in the room coming from the flickering glow of a dying lamp. Jason Cole sat hunched over, his eyes fixed on the dial of the radio. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the frequency, his heart pounding in time with the static. The storm had knocked out the power hours ago, but the radio, an old relic his grandfather had left him, still worked, if only just. It had been 3 days since the strange broadcasts started. At first, Jason thought it was a fluke, a glitch, a weird coincidence. But then the messages became more specific. At first, just garbled noise and strange murmurs, but slowly, over time, the voice began to speak. First in whispers, then clearer, more urgent. It was always the same voice, a deep, guttural tone that seemed to echo from somewhere far beyond the static. Jason, you're not alone. He swallowed hard, feeling a chill crawl up his spine. The voice had called his name again tonight. It was clearer now, but the words it spoke were more disturbing, more personal. Get out, Jason. They're coming. Jason was starting to lose his grip on reality. His family had disappeared without a trace 2 years ago, and since then the isolation of the farmhouse, the endless quiet of the woods around him, had been enough to drive anyone mad. But the radio, the voice on the radio, was something different, something alive. It felt too real. He hadn't told anyone about the broadcasts. Who would believe him? People in town had already started calling him crazy ever since his family vanished. No one had ever found out what had happened to them, and Jason had never been able to shake the feeling that something or someone was watching him. The radio crackled again, louder this time, as if the voice was fighting to break through the static. Jason leaned closer, his breath shallow. His heart thudded in his chest, but there was something else too. Something buried deep beneath the fear. A sense of inevitability, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Jason, the voice said, its tone now softer, almost pitying. You've been searching for answers. But the truth is, the answers are already here. They're inside you. His stomach twisted. The room seemed to grow colder, and the faint scent of wet earth and rot filled his nostrils. Jason's hand trembled as he adjusted the dial again, trying to get a clearer signal, but the voice only became more distorted. He felt the familiar weight of dread pressing against his chest. No! Don't listen, the voice rasped, as if in warning. You need to leave. Now Jason's mind was in turmoil. The house creaked around him, the old timbers groaning like they were alive. The storm outside howled louder, the wind shrieking through the cracks in the walls. The rain lashed against the windows with a ferocity that felt unnatural, as if nature itself was trying to get in. And then, a knock. Jason froze. His breath caught in his throat, and his fingers instinctively gripped the edge of the table. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent, followed by a voice calling his name from just beyond the door. Jason, you have to let me in. It's too late. Jason stood, rooted to the spot. His mind raced, spinning in circles. The voice on the radio, he couldn't shake it. It was as if the air in the room had thickened, turning suffocating. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. Was he losing his mind, Or was this real? Another knock. Louder, the voice again. Jason, they'll find you. They already have. The house felt alive, shifting, breathing. Jason's hand moved toward the door before he could stop himself. He stood in the darkness, his pulse thudding in his ears, his stomach twisted in knots. He had to know. He had to see. But what if it wasn't a person out there? What if it was something else? What if the voice was right? The radio burst to life again, its static loud and harsh, cutting through the thick silence like a knife. No! Don't open the door! Jason, don't! It was too late. The door flew open, splintering in the wind, and Jason was pulled into the darkness outside. His feet didn't touch the ground. He felt his body lifted, as though the very air around him had turned solid. The radio's final words echoed in his mind. They're here. Suddenly, everything went silent. The storm, the wind, the radio, they all disappeared. Jason's eyes snapped open, and he found himself standing in the middle of the room again, as if nothing had happened. The storm still raged outside, the radio still crackling on the table. But something was different. The voice on the radio was gone. The air was thick with a quiet that felt unnatural. And then he saw it. A figure in the doorway, standing just outside the reach of the dim light. It was tall, gaunt, wearing a black suit, his father's suit, the one he'd last seen him in before everything fell apart. The figure's face was hidden in shadow, but Jason could feel its eyes on him, burning through the darkness. He couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, and the temperature in the room dropped so quickly that Jason could see his own breath misting in the air. The figure didn't move, but Jason could feel it coming closer, its presence suffocating him. Jason, the voice whispered again, not from the radio, but from the figure itself. You've been waiting for me. Jason took a step back, but his legs were weak. He couldn't move. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body wouldn't respond. Don't be afraid, the figure said, stepping into the light. It was his father's face. But it wasn't his father. The eyes were too wide, too vacant, hollow, lifeless. You should have stayed away, the figure murmured, reaching out a hand that was too pale, too cold to be human. The last thing Jason saw before the darkness swallowed him whole was the shadow of the figure, towering over him, its long fingers brushing his cheek, the same cold touch that had once haunted his dreams. And then, the silence. The storm outside raged on, but inside all was still. The radio crackled, one last time, before going completely silent, and the house was empty once again.